I can taste the color green.
Is that anything like me being able to smell the color blue?
Maybe? Is it only certain things that smell like blue? Because for me, it's only bananas that I can taste the green.
For me, it's when I'm getting sick. There's a certain smell I get. I also associate it with not chlorine, but it's kind of close. It's kind of a tangy smell. But
Hmm.
I can smell the color blue. It's fucking weird. Hello and
I think
welcome to
that'd be.
the Idiot Book Nook. My name is Blazewing. My pronouns are they, them.
I'm Lady Punnet. My pronouns are primarily she, her, sometimes they, them. Today is a she, her kind of day.
And today we are doing an episode of Tongues, Tangents, and Tittilations. It has been a long moment since we've done one of these. And we're going to be getting
Yay!
into talking about the behind the scenes of world building. Kind of what goes on when you want to sit down and write something and what has to be done in order to help kind of facilitate that. I've been writing on and off since the late 90s. So, I mean, I'm no stranger to writing, but it's only within the last 5 to 7 years that well, 5 to 10 years rather. No, it's been longer than that now. Within the last 20 years that I've really started kind of learning how to research things and looking into topics. And within the last 5 years that I've actually taken writing somewhat seriously. I'm writing entire stories now, things that I never thought I would be able to do. Most of my early stuff was me dicking around, pulling things out of my own head. And now I'm starting to look at factual information, and I'm actually starting to build a world where our current reality is weaved in with elements of fiction. So we call it almost, I want to call it not historical fiction, but fictional reality. No, that doesn't work. I don't know what I'd call it, but it's a blend of the two with elements from our actual world and our actual history. A lot of
It's a
this,
word for that.
I
Is it
don't.
like, isn't it like alternate universe or something?
It's kind of an alternate universe, but at the same time, there's more of our actual reality. Like a lot of the real world events are taken as they happened in our world. It's just a random fictional story that happens in said world, and I'm blending kind of the supernatural and all of that shit into it. The
Yeah.
amount of research needed to pull something like that off, like I will spend maybe 2 minutes writing and an hour researching one specific fact to make sure that I get it right. You may know, like you may have seen those memes floating around. Like writing is, you writing for 30 seconds and then spending weeks researching. That is not a lie.
It really isn't.
Um, I think done the right way, you can pull it off and make things extremely believable in a setting that I'm trying to do it. But it's all about getting those minor details right. The devil's in the details. What's your
Mm-hmm.
experience with kind of story building and writing and whatnot?
So, so I'm one of those writers that's really good at coming up with scenarios and worlds in their head, but it's transferring that to paper, or in this case screen, because unfortunately paper is slowly dying, which makes me sad in my writing soul, because as we also know, it you retain more information by physically writing it down than typing it. um but so a lot of my writing comes from making alternate universes of things. I've done a lot of fan fiction writing. And when I do my fan fiction writing, it's like, yeah, sure, I can be as silly as I want to be, but I also want it to be somewhat factual. So sometimes, if I'm, like, for example, if I'm doing something on a culture I'm not familiar with, I will do everything in my power to try and make it like as culturally accurate. And through that, I've gained more information about it. So, for example, I'll be reading a fan fiction about people who live in Japan, and I'll read a line that says, "Oh, and I definitely made sure to leave a tip." I'm like, "Oh no, tipping is not a thing in Japan. It is the biggest insult ever." but I digress. I've recently started making because I do DM for some people in my where I live, where basically it's a collection of one shots that takes place in the same world. Because I had this idea where those scams where it's like, oh, you've just inherited a house. Well, that actually happened, and the players were basically my friends as D&D characters. They went to this house, and it turns out that the house is actually a portal to a bunch of different realms, and without the owner of the house there, it is slowly bleeding into this world. So they basically became like almost Power Rangers in a way to make sure the leaking doesn't keep happening. And they got all of their powers slash basically their classes from an Ursine, who is basically from the equivalent of Faerun.
Over in our chat.
But that's my experience writing.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's basically my experience with writing and stuff in that regard. I do have some experience with doing fan fictions, especially if I feel like the canon material could be so much better if they focus more on this. I did that a lot with Miraculous Ladybug. I've been dabbling in a possible Harry Potter slash Baldur's Gate crossover where basically Harry gets transported to Baldur's Gate after his second year, and through that he learns skills and how to improve himself from each member of the Baldur's Gate party. And eventually when he gets back, he's like, okay, I know how to sweet talk my way out of things. I know how to pick locks. I am basically slowly becoming overpowered, and I recognize that Dumbledore, you're doing a lot of shady shit, so I'm gonna wrangle up all the students and we're gonna overthrow you. But it's getting all that on paper.
Speaking of that, Majestically Me in our audience actually brings up a really good point. I have a rich headcanon for my OC. Getting it to paper is the struggle. And I struggled with this for a very long while. So I used to do all of my writing on pen and paper because, I mean, computers weren't as widely available as they were. And phones weren't really a thing like they are now with the smartphones. Since computers become more widely available, it's become a bit easier for me in order to get my thoughts down. But there are a number of tools out there that you can use to help, I think. There are audio recording programs. I use Audio Note Taker. So if I have my class lectures are actually recorded with Audio Note Taker, and I'm considering possibly going ahead and using Audio Note Taker to actually record some of my story ideas in just different note segments. Audio Note Taker, so Audio Note Taker is a paid program, and I got it because of what is it, ADR, the Access to Disability Resources through school. I got it funded. They gave it to me to help with my classwork specifically. But because of that, I got a lifetime license to it.
Sweet.
Things like just a simple audio recorder on your phone can record your voice, and you can kind of just talk at your phone and get your ideas out. And then there's programs like Otter AI, which will take an audio recording and transcribe it for you. Or you can take the time to sit down and transcribe word for word the audio recording yourself, depending on how things go and kind of what your flavor is. You can do text dictation. You can do speech to text, which is a thing for a lot of phones these days. It doesn't always get it right, but it gets it somewhat okay. So speech to text could be a tool that you could use. I know back in the day there used to be a program, I think it was called Merlin. It was voice activated through computer mic. You used to be able to open
I know there was
programs.
I believe there was one also called Dragon Naturally Speaking,
which you can interface with word programs like Microsoft Word and whatnot. And you can just sit there and talk at it, and it will write whatever you're saying. So that could also be a way to get things down onto paper in a computer setting that weren't previously available to you. And then you can sit there and just reorganize the ideas that you've got. Or If you're so inclined and you're feeling lazy and you want to cut some corners, once you get all of this written down in Word format, so you've taken your audio and you've transcribed it into text, you can take the text, throw it through something like Chat GPT, and say, I need you to take all of the ideas from this, and I want you to organize it for me in, like, tell it how you want it to organize it, but you say, I want you to organize it kind of in a chronological order, or best idea to worst idea, that sort of thing. And it will take all of those ideas as you've written them, and it will organize them for you, do exactly what you tell it to.
You know what I find has always helped me, especially if I'm doing like either fan fiction writing or if I want to get like an idea down for a quest line I want to do or things. Because most of the time I have a great idea for either the middle or I have a great idea for the end, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I have a hard time with the start. So what I'll do often, and this has always seemed to help me, is I'll do it in point form.
Mm-hmm.
So similar to how a lot of people will do like writing structures, they'll do like a point form of I want this to happen in this chapter, this has to happen in this chapter. I'll do that. So I'll be like, I want character A to go through this. Okay, how does character A get there? And then it starts this whole cascade. Because writing point form is a lot easier than trying to write a paragraph, especially if you're just trying to throw ideas at a board to see what does and doesn't stick.
And for me, point form doesn't work because I need to include too many details in order to get things just the way I want them. Point
Mm-hmm.
form can work if you're used to working in that format. Absolutely. It can be a wonderful way of just quickly jotting ideas and thoughts down. But for somebody who wants a little more detail, point form's not going to work. And it can be painstaking to drag out like a notepad every time, or even to drag out the notes app on your phone every time. Because that also requires like time to sit there and actually write out the idea.
This is true.
I'm not diminishing anything that you've said. It's just kind of
I understand it's
okay.
different strokes for different folks because I've always like so when I say point form, I don't mean like, oh, it's like 3 words. Sometimes it's like a mini paragraph, but it's still in point form. Because
Yep.
when I think of writing paragraphs, I think of like this is the beginning of writing a story. Whereas with point form, it's maybe at most 3 sentences and then I move on to the next point. Because when I have it in point form, then I can look at the points and be like, okay, this is the point I want to focus on to start with the thing. Or sometimes I just have to write something down because, as you know, with ADHD brains, if we don't write something down, a lot of times we forget about it. And then we're like, oh, I had such a great idea,
Yep.
but I can't for the life of me remember it. And it was a couple of hours ago. So I can't even like go back and remember the things I was remembering previously to try and remember what the idea was. And it's fucking annoying. It's like, come on, brain, why can't you have like a little notes section in there?
Another thing is kind of knowing where things take place within your story. Kind of. See, those of you that have followed me for quite a while will know that I run a project called the Black Butterfly Society. And this is a
Yep.
multifaceted project. So on one hand, it's my community. You know, the community that I've built as I've put myself out to the public, as I've started networking and interacting with people, as I've started getting to know people. It's a storytelling initiative, as in I have multiple stories going at the moment. I've got the short form TikTok storyline, which is going to be soon released. I've got Tales of the Black Butterfly, my VTM stuff, Vampire the Masquerade stuff that I'm doing, is all based in the Black Butterfly canon, Black Butterfly Society canon. I've got writings about it going back at least a few years. The Black Butterfly for me, I don't have an actual map of it, but I have kind of a layout in my head that I really need to get out on paper. I really need to figure out what the best way is for me to get that map out on paper. But when you're world building like that, I think knowing where things take place also helps. That way you can get a better visual. For those, so I'm going to show you something here. For those of you that can't see, this is an art book that I used to, I'm holding up an art book that I used to draw in when I was going through kind of a I want to learn to draw phase. And I mean, it didn't go too badly. If I had the patience to sit down and like keep at it, I could probably actually draw fairly well. Um, and I'll get to my point here in a second. I just want to show you guys something. Like I was drawing like full on like anime eyes. Like full on anime eyes. I was drawing, where is it? I had one of the best drawings that I did was actually of a cat face. And again, I'll get to my point in a second here, but I want to show you guys this because it looks really cool, and I didn't think I was capable of pulling that off, but it's this one here.
Oh,
Like,
it is well done.
right? But one of the things that I started doing during this drawing phase, and I really ought to get back into this, is map making. I did a couple of different trials of this. So this is kind of a lake and river system with land. This was all done with dice. So I took a couple of different...
The old throw the dice trick.
Yeah, I used dice for this. So throw the dice, take a couple of different colors of dice, mix them up, throw them on the map, and wherever they land is kind of where your bodies are, right? I've also heard of people using rice, but I have more
I've seen
than
people
just
use beans.
like I have maps that I can use, and I want to build like an entire thing of maps at some point. But I digress. Knowing where things take place, I think, is going to help give you a better visual as to kind of the story that's going on. Your setting is extremely important, and once you have that cemented, locations are going to start popping up for you, I think. Locations, events.
Majestically Me actually says the worst thing is when you get an idea and you can't write it down, like when you're driving, and that is completely valid.
Yep. Depending on where you are, you could pull over and, I guess, write it down. If you have somebody else in the car, you can get them to write it down. Or, if you have, like me, a smartphone. I know in a lot of places you're not allowed to operate a smartphone while you're driving, but open my voice recorder. My voice recorder is now open. Or you can, if your phone is voice activated, you can tell it to take a note for me, or to add something to my notes, or to make a note for later, or to make an alarm for later, or, you know, a calendar event for later. And you can tell it to put in these notations and calendar events whatever you want. So if you have a story idea, you can tell your phone to record that. You just got to set up like voice recognition.
You're not getting treats right now.
Something that might help, and a lot of the times voice activation can be done hands-free if it's set up right.
Some other good points are to take inspiration from real life beliefs or real life places. Like, take a look at Greece, at Egypt, at Rome, and all of the thing. Hello, hi, honey. I know you want attention, but I'm in the middle of something. I'm in the middle of something.
Look at some of the books that we've read. The Bartimaeus trilogy, The Amulet of Samarkand, happened.
That was so good.
Yeah, happened in like Middle East. There was another one that we'd read. I thought there was another one that we read.
There was the Prospero School that took place in like a version of England.
Like a lot of these. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm trying to think of the other ones. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Sorry, my brain's flatlining too. It's all good. A lot of these stories like take inspiration from real world events. it's kind of letting your imagination run wild, I think, or imagining what if scenarios. It's basically how the Black Butterfly started. I started with this idea in my head of this person who was basically left for dead in the middle of World War II. And that one individual has now spawned an entire storytelling universe that I am in the process of world building and putting details into and collaborating with people to get these details down. I have people that are actually contributing to this that are like writing entire segments of this lore for me because they wanted to spearhead something under the flag of the Black Butterfly. And I was like, cool, go for it. You want to write it? I'll add it to the official lore. Just let me know what you've got.
Mm-hmm.
A concept that I love in writing now is alternate timelines. Absolutely. What if scenarios? What if there's one specifically that we actually have on our media server? You want to talk alternate timelines? It's called CSA, Confederate States of America. What if the South had won? Looking at real world events and being like, what if this one event had gone just slightly differently? It's a lot like, you know, our choices lead to us being the people. Every choice that we've made in our life has led to us being the person that we are today. And without even one of those choices turning out as they did, we wouldn't be the same person. It's the same thing with world history. If one event had have been slightly different, the world as we know it would have been irrevocably altered.
Exactly. Marvel actually did a whole mini series of what ifs, like what if Captain. Will you stop? Go away.
Can I just say for a minute, I am a huge fan of Captain Carter.
Captain Carter would have been amazing.
Captain Carter is like fucking badass, and she is my favorite what if character because, damn, yo,
she got shit done. Concept I love is alternate timelines. They are absolutely fascinating because you can literally it's the butterfly effect. You change one small thing that could have happened and it has catastrophic consequences. Like I remember having this conversation with my boyfriend's kids and they were like, I would pick time travel as a superpower because then I could go back in time and stop this, this, and this from happening. And then me and my boyfriend are trying to explain, well, honey, that wouldn't be a good idea because then other things could happen. And they're like, but what if I just like Hitler? Then all our problems would have been solved. And I'm like, well, maybe, but that could have also stopped other things from happening. But it's also trying to explain to like a 9-year-old the concept of the butterfly effect and how actions have consequences.
Going back and killing Genghis Khan is another one. I mean, you've just immediately eliminated 1/4 of the world's population because they have DNA that is linked to Genghis Khan. You go and off Hitler, and suddenly we are left with a situation where a lot of our medical technologies don't exist. We got them as atrocious as what happened during World War II was. A lot of the medical knowledge that we have comes specifically from that and the human experimentation that happened. So if you get rid of one thing, you immediately eliminate all of these other things that were there. And again, it's irrevocably altered. And a lot of people don't seem to realize this. A lot of people don't understand this. And that absolutely blows my mind. It's not cause and effect.
It's the butterfly effect.
Yeah, I mean, it is the butterfly effect, but there was something else that I was looking at. I think it's a slight play on the grandfather paradox. So by killing Hitler, a lot of the medical advances that we have wouldn't be here today, which means you might actually not exist, which means there's nobody to go back in time and actually kill Hitler, which causes a paradox, and it causes reality to basically collapse.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't take this shit into account.
See, I let the kids not understanding it fly because, like I said, they're 9 years old. Their frontal lobe isn't even fully developed yet to understand why it's not a good idea to throw flea powder down a hallway.
Well, listen, honey, there are days I'm not sure my frontal lobe is developed completely.
But actually, this brings up another point of when you're creating your own world. 1 second, please.
One moment, folks. We seem to have...
Oh, I left the faucet on. Okay, that's what that sound is. My headphones were dying.
No worries.
Basically, when you're creating a world and you're trying to think of things to do, you can actually take events that have happened in real life and put them in your world.
Yep.
As like a jumping off point.
Yep. So, for instance, Blaze. Blaze's backstory. So, a few of you don't know this, but the Black Butterfly is captained by Blaze. It's run by Blazewing. Blaze took over, I think it was the 70s or the 80s. I still haven't quite ironed that detail out yet. But it was after a 25-year blood fugue.
Mm-hmm.
Blaze was there during Woodstock. I'm sorry, words. Blaze was there during Woodstock, but the inciting event for Blaze was actually, like I said, World War II. Blaze was left on a battlefront. An old... she was running through an old destroyed village and got caught, effectively, by the SS. And the entire course of her life changed after that. But I took this real world thing that happened and transposed it into a fictional setting, or into a fictional, put a fictional event into it, and suddenly I've got this thing that may or may not have happened during an actual world event, which I want to say leads to a bit of believability. It's just kind of finding that balance to make it overly believable and to kind of bring people in. What else have we got? Let me think. If you're going to write something like that, you need to make sure you get your details right. Again, it comes back to research. And it can take hours, it can take days to find facts. I have gone digging. Like I use a couple of different programs. I use Obsidian, which is a markdown text editor for programming that I can have multiple windows open in. I also use Scrivener, which is it's more manuscript focused. But within Scrivener, I have maps that I have spent weeks digging for, like maps of old Europe, old London that I have specifically gone digging for and spent weeks digging for to find them, going through archives and old history websites and just through the dregs and depths of the internet to find these maps specifically so I could get those details right. And eventually this may very, very well lead to me talking to actual historians about these things, or reviewing like old wartime footage or old wartime soldier interviews, that sort of thing, in order to make sure I get some of these details right. Because what I'm writing now is only draft 1. This is like the early beta version, or the early alpha version that I'm in the process of doing. But I want to make sure if I'm writing about something like this, I want to make sure I do it justice. So, what else? I'm trying to think here. I don't know. Does anybody in the audience have anything they want to talk about on this topic? Kind of the behind the scenes of writing and story building or storytelling and world building.
Speaking ADHD moments, make sure you remember to turn off your faucet and that your sink is cleared.
Did you flood your apartment?
I flooded my kitchen.
How bad?
Both my sinks were filled and it got to the floor.
How bad did it get to the floor?
Kitchen is covered in water.
Go mop up your kitchen.
I'm working on it! I just want you to know why I'm not here right now.
Oh, you're good. We're gonna go ahead and possibly wrap up a little early, unfortunately, while Lady Punnet goes to mop up the swimming pool in her kitchen. At least we're gonna wrap up the podcast a little early. I might throw something on just kind of after, but yeah, that's gonna be a thing. I'm interested to know what you guys think on the subject. Please feel free to leave us comments and whatnot. And feel free to throw us an email at idiotbooknook@gmail.com. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can do so at linktr.ee/idiotbooknook, where you'll be able to find links to our podcast, to our YouTube, to the Twitch, and all of our individual projects on the net. And you'll be able to follow along with us, see what we're up to. But for this episode of the Idiot Book Nook, and this episode of Tongues, Tangents, and Tittilations, I'm Blazewing.
I'm Lady Punnet.
And we're going to go deal with a flood in the kitchen. So have yourselves a great day. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you guys soon.